Hi everyone, hold on to your horses and tighten up your britches. Today I have yet another set of shocking stories that are sure to make your head spin. You might even learn the truth about something that makes it impossible for you to sleep tonight. So get yourself comfortable, grab your favorite drink, and cozy up with that subscribe button. Thanks. Now let's get into the stories. Hey Lilith, I wasn't sure who to turn to with this information, but I think you might be the right person. I've made a shocking discovery and I want to share it with you. I'm a park ranger stationed in the Rocky Mountain National Park, Colorado. I've been doing the job for the better part of a decade and was with the U.S. Forestry Service before that. It's safe to say that I know my way around the mountains and have seen everything there is to see. At least I thought so. We have remote satellite stations scattered throughout the more wilderness areas of the park. They don't appear on any park maps, and the other rangers don't usually talk about them. We've had instances of vandalism, and fugitives have even taken up residence within them on multiple occasions. They serve as a form of emergency station, and sometimes personnel from various government agencies use them for extended research projects. Most of them are relatively easy to reach, but a few of them require several days' hike on foot. Every so often, we're directed to check on some of the more remote locations, just to check on supplies and building integrity and things like that. And that's what I found myself doing a few months ago. I was asked to go to the most distant station of them all, half-day's ride on an ATV, plus 2 days on foot, one way. So I brought a fair amount of gear with me. From what I understood, nobody had been there for 6 months. But a recent flyby from one of our helicopters thought they saw a wisp of smoke in the vicinity of the shelter. It's basically on the side of a mountain, so there's no way the helicopter could land anywhere, even close by. So I packed up my stuff and headed out on a clear, warm morning. The ride was easy, and I made a good time. When I came to the point, I would need to leave my ATV at this point, and so I locked it in a small hut used for just that purpose. Then I began my 2-day journey on foot up the mountain path. It was late in the evening of the first day when I had my first experience. It was going to be dark soon, and I was looking for a good place to spend the night with a source of fresh water. I eventually came upon a mountain stream and followed it up ways until I reached a clearing where I could pitch my tent, except I found something in the clearing. It was the carcass of a full-grown bull elk. It was fresh, probably less than a day old. The bizarre part was the pair of arrows sticking out from its rump. I had seen things like these in history books. Stone-tipped heads lashed to a stick of shaved wood with some kind of thin fiber. I'm not a hunter, but I know a bunch of them and have seen the gear they use. These arrows didn't come from any kind of modern-day materials that I knew of. I've heard of people who took up primitive-style hunting, but didn't think anyone came all the way out here to do it. There wasn't anyone around, and there wasn't much I could do about it. I didn't want to stay near the elk in case any nighttime scavengers or predators came along, so I continued another half-mile and spent a comfortable night under the stars. The next day, I got up and continued on. The trail became a little more difficult to traverse at this point, but I still hoped to reach the station before nightfall. I can't explain it, but for most of the morning, I had a weird feeling that I was being watched. Only by what, I didn't know. I found out just after lunch. I had stopped to boil up a freeze-dried meal I had brought. The aroma of the teriyaki chicken cut sharply through the scent of the fresh pine trees all around. I was just about to take my first bite when a rustle from a nearby bush and a blur of movement caught my attention. I turned quickly, thinking it was an animal, and instead came face to face with a man. If that's what it can even be called. It was about 5 feet tall and had a mane of coarse hair across most of its face. It had a tan complexion and a thick brow over eyes twice the size of mine. Held tightly in its left hand was a long shaft of wood ending in a stone tip, exactly like the one I had seen on the arrow the day before. They each wore garments made from what looked like deerskin. We froze, staring at each other for several moments until 2 more similar creatures emerged from behind nearby trees. One held another spear, and the other appeared to be a woman carrying a deerskin sack over her shoulder. They didn't advance any further, and I wasn't sure what to do. I placed my bag of teriyaki on the ground and slowly started pacing back. When I had gone about 20 steps, the woman hunched forward, loped over to the bag of food I had left, and snatched it off the ground. She smelled it a few times and then scooped a hairy handful from the bag, shoving it into her mouth. She let out an excited yelp and jumped up and down a few times. She rushed over to one of the men and handed him the bag, the scenario playing out again and then finishing with the third man. The woman turned back to me and let out a string of guttural noises, none of which I understood. I simply stood still, arms raised in the air, palms facing outward. I didn't know what to do. I had my service pistol, but it was in the satchel that I had left sitting next to where I was boiling the food. One of the other men started speaking in that same harsh language. When I didn't respond, he gripped his spear with his other hand and stepped forward a few feet. I was preparing to make a run for it when from the forest behind them came at least half a dozen calls spoken in that same strange language. They looked at each other and then at me. The two men turned and ran into the forest behind them. The woman stood staring at me a few moments longer, then dashed forward, grabbed my satchel, and took off into the forest after her friends. I turned and headed back the other way, running until my lungs felt like they were going to burst. I had no choice but to give up the journey to the station. I had no supplies, and besides, I didn't really want to run into those things again. I had a lot of time to think on the way back and decided that I was going to lie. Nobody back at the ranger station was going to believe me. I'm not even sure I believed myself. I told my supervisor that I was driven off by a mother black bear and that I lost all my gear in the process, which made me the laughingstock of all the rangers and earned me the nickname Bear Boy. They ended up pushing the job off for another month and said they are going to send another ranger. I can't explain what or who those things were. Of course, I have heard of Neanderthals and cavemen, but they have been extinct for 200,000 years, right? That's why I sent this to you. I'm hoping you or someone you know can sort this out. And if those things up there really are a primitive species of human, then we should try to protect them. They might be the only ones left on Earth. This happened a few years ago when I was still in high school. I'm in college now. We all decided to do what normal, bored, suburban high school kids do when they hear about a place they aren't supposed to go. We got wind of an abandoned psychiatric hospital a few cities over and decided we needed to check it out. Urban legend had said it was haunted and creepy. Naturally, myself and 3 friends needed to check this place out. I mean, I didn't believe in all the rumors and whatnot, but then again, I thought it'd be pretty great if something did happen. So we got flashlights and a couple of cameras, charged our phones, got our backpacks, and got everything ready for the weekend to go check this place out. There were pictures online of the place, but they were all during the day. We needed to go at night, the middle of the night if we could. The pictures were pretty crazy. It was old, run down, but I needed to see it in person. Experience the place for myself. Apparently the cops did monitor the place, so we had to be on the lookout for that too. I was not looking forward to being arrested or whatever. I don't need that in my life. We decided to go on a Sunday instead of Saturday. Saturday is usually way busier, whereas Sunday people aren't out as much. At least that's what we all decided. I don't know if that makes sense or not. Anyway, my friends came over and we piled into my car and left my house around 10 p.m. It took about 45 minutes to get to the city of Northville. Another couple of minutes to get to the hospital. I'm not going to lie, it was pretty creepy, especially at night, and I'm not the type to get creeped out by something. It was big and janky looking, broken windows, boarded windows, overgrown grass. It was like out of a movie. I just kind of laughed when I saw it. We kept our flashlights off going up to the building. We hadn't seen any cops, but since we weren't used to the area, we weren't really sure where they hung out. I mean, they have to drive by ever so often, right? We found some broken windows to get into the place. It wasn't hard. I used the light on my phone, and 2 of my friends used their flashlights. They tried to point them towards the ground so that the light wasn't too bright. My other friend held his cameras to take pictures and video of our exploration. Everything was dingy and dirty, and the paint was peeling off the walls. A lot of the tiled floors were cracked and broken. Things would crunch under your feet when you walked in certain areas. There was furniture and all kinds of stuff left behind. We found a room with stacks of old paint cans piled up almost to the ceiling. There were old cafeteria tables folded up, tables covered with old papers and plastic containers, a room filled with like a dozen fridges. It was really weird. Like, why would you just leave all this stuff for years, you know? There's like graffiti everywhere on the walls, like all over the place. We took a bunch of pictures of some of it. There was one room that had "You're not getting out alive" painted in red on the walls. That kind of freaked us out, and we just kind of laughed it off. There was one area, though, that had "I love you" on a brick wall, and that's when stuff started to get kind of weird. We're standing there taking a picture of the wall when we could swear that we hear footsteps down the hall. We just stop and look at each other, and my friend Steve gets all wide-eyed, you know. I'm trying not to laugh, and my other friends are like shushing me. So I go and look down the hallway, and I can't see anything. I mean, it's a super old building. It could be anything, and with the graffiti on the walls, people obviously come here from time to time. So we keep going. We find a couple of rooms with broken glass all over the floor and some abandoned wheelchairs and old bed frames. We come across one room with a metal table in the middle of the room with cabinets lining the walls. There's like holes in the table and a rubber hose attached to it. I don't know what the hell that was used for, but we take some pictures of it and we hear the footsteps again. We look at each other, and I swear I hear some whistling. I go and stick my head out the door and look around. I don't see anything, and now I don't hear anything. My friends are starting to get kind of panicky at this point. So we walk out into the hall and we hear something creaking, like a door or a window. That made my buddy Rob jump, and I almost bust out laughing. He stops, though, and stares into his camera and points at the screen on it. We all crowd around him and see this shadow like moving down the hall. I shine the flashlight down the hall, and there's nothing there. I look back at the screen, and it seems like the shadow is still moving down the wall of the hallway. Well, that was it. That sent my friends into full freak-out mode, and they take off down the hallway. I go running after them, and we hear like loud crashing behind us, like things are either being flung around or smashed into each other. I don't really know. We find a room with smashed out windows, and we head outside. We were all freaked and turned around, so it took a second to figure out which way the car was, but we ran the entire way. We still have the video, and we still show it off to people that we tell this story to. A few people get pretty freaked out by it. Others try to justify it and figure it out. It's shaped like a man with a long coat, I think. Other people think it's a lady with a dress. Some people just see a blob. I really don't know, but it was definitely a crazy night, and none of my friends want to do anything like it ever again. I was studying to get my GED, so that meant I had to work during the day and to go to night classes. Classes were held at a local high school. I live in a big city. They let out at around 10, and sometimes my friends that lived in the area would be out for drinks at that time. There are several bars and clubs on a strip within walking distance. I always walked the same way every time. One night, I was walking my usual path when I saw something going on maybe a half block down. It looked like a bunch of high school or college kids, and whatever was happening wasn't good. It might even have gotten dangerous from the sound of it. I cut down an alley to stay away from it. At the time, I just didn't want to be harassed. But when I started thinking about it, I didn't want to be a witness to any kind of violence either. Sometimes innocent bystanders come out worse than victims, and I was alone. I couldn't risk it. I had never cut down this particular alley before, and I began to wonder if I should have taken my chances with the crowd of kids. It was dark. My phone's flashlight didn't help much. I could see maybe a couple of feet in front of me. There were no overhead lights. Something was rattling around in a trash can behind me. A rat, maybe. I didn't know. So I picked up the pace. It started raining. The buildings I was walking between shielded me from it some, but it started coming down hard. I couldn't wait to cut back over onto a main road and duck under some awnings. I was probably a good 100 foot from the street at this point. I had already put my phone away. I didn't want it to get wet. I heard some rattling again by some trash cans, so I turned around. That's when I spotted something trying to crouch behind them. It wasn't doing a very good job because by the looks of it, the thing had to be taller than me. It was by far the weirdest thing I have ever seen, unimaginable. I felt like I was hallucinating. It was like a mixture of animal parts placed in a bag and shaken out into this. Wings, curled horns, scales, and fur. It flicked its long tongue. It had to be nearly 3 feet long. I don't know why, but I wasn't scared, just in disbelief. What the heck was this thing? It had the head of a goat, and when it opened its eyes, they glowed yellow. It was goblin or devil, like standing on 2 legs. Its arms were short. When it rose to full height, it had to be nearly 9 feet tall with the horns. That's when my heart started kicking into gear. I began backing away. It let out a shrill scream. I scrambled back into some trash cans and fell hard on my butt. I ran through the rain, down the alley, and out the side I had come in at. The group of kids were gone. There were cars driving by, though, and I flagged down a passing cab. The driver laughed at me when I told him my story. I look younger than I am. He kept saying, "Okay, kid." He dropped me off at my apartment. The next night, I took an Uber straight home after my class. I was afraid to walk home. I was already sick of people laughing at me, thinking I was making a joke. No one believed me. I had to get proof. 3 days after I saw it originally, I went back during the daytime. The alley was nowhere near as long as it seemed to be in the dark. There were tons of trash cans, but I figured out where I think I had spotted the thing and took a picture. Admittedly, I was a little freaked out, even in the daylight. I would come back after dark and bring my big flashlight. It might even work as a weapon if I needed it. I was nervous all day at the thought of coming back, but I had to get proof. Sitting through my class was nearly impossible. I kept watching the clock. I honestly shouldn't even have gone. I don't remember anything we studied. When class let out, I wasn't in a hurry to get to the alleyway. I remember I was shaking. I kept checking for my flashlight even though it was a big hulking thing in my bag, and I could feel its weight. Like I said, class lets out around 10. It was probably closer to 11 when I finally reached my destination. I took a deep breath, turned on my flashlight, and entered the alley. I decided to walk fast. Maybe the light and the noise would scare it, if it was even here. I just wanted a glimpse, actually a photo. That's what I really wanted. I was disappointed, but mostly relieved when I reached the other end of the alley. There was nothing there. I checked behind me one more time. Something caught my attention on a fire escape, maybe halfway down the alley. I shined my flashlight up toward it. Something was up there. It had to be the thing. I don't know what on earth came over me, but I shouted, "Hey!" As I ran closer. It screamed. I fumbled with my phone. I tried to get a picture, but it flew up and over the fire escape and onto the roof. It disappeared after that. I never got my proof. I've tried to go down that alley a dozen times since then, still carrying my flashlight with me. I've never seen it again, though. I tell the story all the time. No one ever believes me. I wish I had gotten proof. Just one photo. Hi there. I'm a new viewer and I found your YouTube channel when I was scouring the internet looking for answers. I wasn't much of a believer in all those paranormal things people talk about. I've always just thought folks were overreacting, letting their imagination run wild. It feels weird to be on the other side now, to have a story to tell that a lot of people will think is fake. But I can swear right now, this actually happened. I have a small farm in Townsend, Delaware. Just some chickens and corn to sell, but not a lot. And we keep a cow for our own use. Plus, we have a medium-sized garden to feed our family. That's in Newcastle County, about a half hour from Battery Park. There are a lot of farms out here in this area. We've been having some trouble with something getting to our chickens these past 6 months or so. I figured it was a fox, managing to get in under the fence. A couple of times lately, I'd go out in the morning and find a mess of feathers, but no offal or feet or anything. Whatever got to the bird, it carried it off to eat. I've got a German Shepherd, but he's still mostly a pup, and I don't quite trust him yet to wander around loose. He stays in the house at night. But the night that this happened, we'd penned him up on the enclosed porch because he'd gotten into something that made him sick. Nothing serious, but I didn't want him messing up the house. So when he started carrying on around 2 in the morning, barking and whining, I wasn't sure if he just had to go do his business or if he saw something on the property. Either way, I had to get up and take him outside. I did grab my rifle, though, thinking I might catch the fox in the act. The first sign I had that something was wrong was the way my pup was acting. He got out on the grass and sniffed the air and then whimpered and didn't want to roam. Now, usually he just races around like a goof and I've got to keep whistling for him. But he just stayed near the side of the house and did his thing, then scampered back over to the porch. I let him back in, knowing he'd had a time of it, and just figured he still felt ill. While I was out, it made sense to walk out to the hen house and see if everything looked right. It's a little bit away from the house. As I was headed over there, the cow started bellowing, which is really unusual for her. I decided to stop at the barn first. When I checked on her, she was all right, but really twitchy, all wide-eyed and nervous. I looked around good to see if I could see a snake around. You know, that will spook a cow. I didn't see anything, so I let her be and went on to the chicken pen. Once I'd gotten 10 yards away, I could hear the hens fussing. Something had them all riled up, for sure. I threw the bolt on my rifle so I'd be ready to nail the fox if I saw him. I've got lights up over the pen, and the area was pretty well illuminated. There are 2 structures for the birds and a small shed where I keep the feed. I looked through the fence and didn't see anything, but something had them squawking, so I unlatched the gate and went inside. As soon as I got in there, I could smell it. There was a strong scent of sulfur, like you'd just lit a match. I remember panicking for a second, looking for fire. I guess I just associate sulfur with fire. I wasn't even thinking about the fox now, just sniffing the air and trying to figure out what's burning. Then I hear a squawk from a bird, and it's just cut short. It came from behind the feed shed. I stood still for a minute, knowing something had just killed a hen. I crept over there real easy with my rifle aimed, coming around the corner. When I saw the thing, I almost dropped my gun. That's how shocked I was. It was crouched down low, huddled over the hen it had caught. It was as big as a large calf, with a goat's head and curved horns, and there were damn wings on its back, like something out of a storybook. I just froze, forgetting about the gun in my hand. The thing looked up, and I swear, it just looked evil. Glowing yellow eyes, and its head all bony and ridged. It was holding that dead hen in these little front legs like you see on a Tyrannosaurus Rex. Skinny, with talons. The thing screeched at me, and the sound was like something straight from hell, like a cross between an angry giant bird and the scream a cougar makes. I stumbled back and fell on my ass, dropping my gun. Then I scrambled up as quick as I could, scared to pieces it was going to attack me. I snatched up my rifle and pulled the trigger, shooting like a crazy man, not even taking time to aim. The thing took off. It actually flew. These giant bat wings just unfolded and it launched into the air, carrying the hen. I saw its legs then hawked like a horse's, and it had a skinny, whip-like tail. The thing didn't rise too high. Maybe it couldn't. It only went about 15 feet up and flew straight away, not higher. I shot at it one more time, but I know I missed. I really didn't have much of a chance. Well, I guess I did, but I blew my chance by falling on my ass. I went out the next morning to look for something to prove what I saw. There were signs of a scuffle behind the shed and some tracks in the dirt that looked like hooves. But it's been dry lately and they didn't imprint well. I took pictures, but you can't really tell what you're looking at. In fact, they looked like nothing, and I just deleted the photos. I've decided I'm going to get one of those hunter's cameras with night vision that's motion activated. I'll set it up in the chicken pen, and maybe I'll get lucky and get a picture. If I do, I'm going to send it to you. Then I'll have proof there's something weird out here in Delaware farm country. Keep your fingers crossed for me. I've never written into a show before, but the experience I had is keeping me up at night. I'm hoping that if you read it on your show, then someone will say something in the comments, like they've heard of this or maybe even seen one themselves. That would sure make me feel a whole lot better. I live in New Hampshire. I'd prefer not to say the actual town name. But it's a pretty small town and a strongly Christian community. I'm afraid of what my neighbors would say if I told them I saw this thing on my property. We have black bears here, and they are always getting in your trash cans. I've even seen a young black bear robbing birdseed from my bird feeder. So when I kept finding my cans overturned, I felt pretty strongly that bears were the culprit. I don't believe in shooting animals. I don't own a gun. When I see bears near the house, it's usually enough to go out with a couple of frying pans and clang them together. Unless you get between a mother and her cubs, bears are pretty easy to scare off. Where I live is pretty far from any real city, and there's not much reflected light. It gets really dark, too. But the upside is that you can see a lot of stars. Since I was having trouble with my trash cans, I installed some of those motion sensor lights on the back of my house. A few weeks ago, I was settled in front of the TV in my living room, watching the 11 o'clock news, when the motion sensor lights came on and I heard a trash can get knocked over. So I scrambled up and ran into the kitchen to grab a couple of saucepans, then rushed out the back door to catch the bears in the act. I figured if I could do this a few times, make a lot of noise right when they were scrounging the cans, they'd associate the unpleasant sound with the act and maybe find someone else to bother. But when I got out on my back porch, I didn't see any bears. The lights were blazing, and I scanned the yard, but all I saw was the overturned trash can. There were bags on the ground that had spilled out, but nothing had been torn open. I figured that when the lights came on, the bear took off. At least that's what I thought at the time. I wasn't wearing shoes, but I knew I'd better toss the bags back in and secure the lid, or the raccoons would come by and make a mess. I stepped back into the kitchen and put on my wellies, then tromped out to the yard to deal with the bags. I bent down to pick up one of the bags, but then I noticed the black plastic had beads of moisture on it. It hadn't rained for a few days, and I was pretty sure the inside of the can was dry. I was about to pick it up anyway, but I was kind of grossed out, wondering if the animal, bear, or raccoon, had urinated on it. I sniffed the air, but didn't smell anything. I decided to play it safe and walked around to the side porch where I keep a pair of latex gloves. I was rummaging through the shelves on the porch looking for the gloves when the backyard light timed out since I wasn't in the yard. It was annoying since now I had no illumination to help me find the gloves, but I found them a few minutes later without having to go back inside and get a flashlight. I stepped back onto the grass and headed through the side yard to the back, where the trash cans were. When I got to the corner of the house, the motion detector kicked in and the floodlights came back on. What I saw stopped me in my tracks, my blood running cold. It defied explanation. There was a creature like nothing I've ever seen before, crouched over the trash bags. It had almost a human form, except it was really gaunt, and the head was elongated. It was completely naked and hairless. Even its head and its skin was kind of a weird pale color. It was crouched on all fours like an animal. I didn't know what I was seeing. My mind just couldn't process it. I gasped, and the thing looked up. Its face was absolutely terrifying. Big, black, oval-shaped eyes, no nose at all. Its mouth was just this open, black pit. I think it saw me watching it because it suddenly made this weird clicking sound. I stumbled back, too afraid to even run, and the thing scooted away super fast. It was like a blur. It was so fast. On all fours the whole time. The yard lights were still on, and I could see it now, crouched on the side of the garage. And when I say crouched on the side of the garage, I mean literally. It was defying gravity, crouched on all fours, somehow clinging to the side wall of my garage. My eyes were glued to it. I was too afraid to turn my back on it. I was so scared, I felt like I was going to pass out. It skittered away, and suddenly it was on the roof of the garage. The way it moved was almost the most frightening aspect. It was there, and then it was somewhere else. Then the yard lights went out because I had stayed motionless for a few minutes, and the thing was out of range. So, for a split second, I'm in absolute darkness with this creature. I almost peed my pants. I took 2 tiny steps forward, and the lights came back on. Thank God. I looked at the roof, but it was gone. It was several more minutes before I was brave enough to move toward the backyard, but I knew if I didn't move, the lights would go out again. I had come out the back door, and that was the only door that was unlocked. I didn't see it again. I got back inside the house and locked the doors and windows. I left the garbage can overturned on the grass and the bags right where they lay. Raccoons and bears were the least of my worries. I haven't got a decent night's sleep since that happened. Well, that's my story. I'd be curious to know if anyone else has ever seen this creature, and if they have any more information about it. I hope it never comes back. I can't even make myself go outside at night anymore.